If you are new here, this is the most beginner friendly complete web development course, and these are some of the projects we will be covering in this course. I upload lots of lessons per week, so please subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss any of them. I respond promptly to comments, so if you want to ask or say something, feel free to drop it in the comments. If you missed any of the previous lessons, the link to the entire playlist is down in the description box. Let's get started. In this section, we are going to look at CSS. CSS is a very interesting language. It's a styling language. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and as the name suggests, it's responsible for styling a website. So CSS is what adds the beauty to a website. Before we go into details of CSS, let me show you this. This is what we shall be building at the end of this section, this fictional website. All right, so this is cool website here, a very simple website. It has the home page where we currently are, it has the about page, and it has the services page as well. Okay, so this is the website with CSS. Let me just demonstrate to you what CSS does. All right, I'm going to go back to the code of this website here, and I'm going to unlink the CSS file. Okay, I'm going to use the shortcut for commenting out a code, which is command and then /, okay, and that would be control and / on Windows. Let me save it. Now look at our website. This is our website without CSS. So this is our website with only HTML, and you can see how horrible it is, right? It's super horrible, and that is what CSS does. CSS adds the beauty. Let me bring back the CSS, save it. Alright, so this is what CSS does. You can just imagine a website without CSS. It's just not possible. CSS is more artistic than HTML. Okay, CSS is more of art. So those of you who enjoy design and all that will enjoy this section. Those who don't might not enjoy this section very well. But wherever you find yourself, try and master CSS. It's very, very important. And I also want to let you know that as we go ahead, as we come to look at other libraries, okay, we will get to Bootstrap, for example, makes CSS very simple. You may not have to code CSS yourself from scratch. Sometimes you can take the code from others or from Bootstrap, for example, and then you utilize it, you modify it, and then it works for you. But the truth is that before you can actually work with these libraries and be able to apply it very well, you need to understand the code behind. You need to understand CSS because it's a library of CSS, even though there's a lot of JavaScript in it, but it's a library of CSS. So you need to understand CSS very well. Okay, and I also believe in understanding what you are doing and not just flowing blindly. All right, so that's CSS. Let us now create a simple file system for this section. Let's open our busy code folder, create a new folder and name it intro to CSS. All right, now let's open our VS Code and then open the folder from there. So this is our folder. You can close the welcome message. All right, so I want to create two files here. The first one is index.html. The second one would be, of course, style.css. All right, let's get our boilerplate code. You remember the shortcuts, exclamation sign, and then enter. Then you have your boilerplate code. Let's change the title to intro to CSS. And you also want to link our HTML file with the CSS. Remember, we do that with the link tag, and then we have relationship. We say style sheet, and then we have the type. We say text stroke CSS. Then finally the href, we say style.css because they are on the same level. All right, let's launch our live server. Okay, so there's nothing there because we haven't put anything in the body. All right, so we are going to just put something small here and then we'll style it with the CSS. Okay, before we do that, let me show you something called the HTML5 semantic tags. These are special tags or special elements that help you to section or divide your website into partitions. So for every website, you have three basic parts. You have the header, and you have a few sections. Sorry, you have section. You may have one or two or three, a number of sections, and then finally you have the footer. All right, so these are the three primary sections or parts of every website at all. We don't really need them here, but I just did them so that you know they exist. They are called the HTML5 semantic tags. Okay, so let's put something here in the header here. Let's put an H1, all right, and say intro to CSS. And then let's put something here as well. Let's first put a paragraph, and then say, let's put some gibberish here. Let's 15 words, then save. Finally, let's add an anchor tag with an href that doesn't point anywhere, so we put hash there, and then it will say click me. All right, so this is our basic structure. Let's go into our CSS. First, I want to show you how to create a comment or how to include comments in CSS. You start your comment with this / and then asterisk, and then everything you type here will be comments. So everything. All right, then you close it with asterisk and then / once again. Now this is how the syntax of CSS looks like. So first you have a selector, and then you have these curly braces, and then you have the property that you want to change, and then you have the value that you want to give that property, and then you end it with a semicolon. Notice that there's a colon over here, and then there's a semicolon at the end. Okay, if you want to change more properties, you can follow this one with another property, and then value again. All right, like that, and then you can chain them up. But remember, I told you being organized is very important, so we don't like chaining them up like that. After the first one, you press enter, and then you have another property over here, then value, and then it continues like that. Okay, let's get a very quick example. I'll comment out this part here so that we don't get any errors. All right, I want to change this H3 over here. I hope it's an H3. Oh, sorry, it's an H1. Okay, so I can select the H1, that's the selector, and then my curly braces. The property I want to change is the color. Okay, and I want to give it a value of red. There you go. So we have the selector, the property, and then the value. The first thing to look at with regards to the structure is the selector. There are various ways of selecting an HTML element for styling. Of course, before you style any element at all, you have to select the elements, and you have to be as specific as possible. There are a number of ways of doing that. We have the simple ways, and we have other more complex ways. The simple ways include the universal selector, and then using the name, and then ID, and then class. This is how the universal selector looks like. It's just an asterisk, and then you open, and anything you put in the universal selector affects everything on the web page. Okay, everything in the HTML document. All right, so let's give them a color of say blue. Did you see that? This one wasn't affected because this one has specifically been given a color over here. So we can change the font size maybe, and then you see it changing. So let's make it 30 pixel. Sorry. As you can see, everything was equally affected. Let's make it. All right, so you can see it's affecting everything here. This is too much, so I'll remove the font size styling. All right, so the next one will be to use the name. A very good example is what we did over here. So you use the name of the tag. Use the H1, which is the name of this tag here. You can use the name of this tag to the paragraph. So I can select the paragraph by using the name of the tag, which is P, and once you do that, what happens is that it will affect every single element that has that name. So if there's another paragraph somewhere in the footer here, okay, So if there's a paragraph over here, that's um, so if there's another footer here, when you select using the tag name, it affects everything there. So let's quickly change the font size to say 30 pixels. Okay, you see that? So it affects every paragraph over there. That's using the name. So you can select the anchor, you can select the header tag, the HTML tag, the body tag, whatever, using the name. All right. The next will be using the ID and the class. So we haven't mentioned ID and class so far. These are ways of identifying the content of the HTML elements. Okay, we can give any element at all an ID or a class. The difference is that ID is specific, ID is unique. You can't give two elements the same ID, okay, but you can give two elements the same class. ID is very unique, so you give it to only one element, an element that you want to give a special styling. I can give this section, for example, an ID, and I will say main section, okay. But for style, for class, you can give as many elements as you want the same class when you want to apply the same styling to all of them. So I can give this intro to CSS, this H1 a class of say black, because I want to give it the color black, and then I can give this anchor to a class of black. But I can't do the same thing for ID. I can't give anything else the ID of main section. All right. So let's see how we use these IDs and classes to select elements using in CSS. All right. So to select using the ID, you first have to type this asterisk, like that, and then followed by the name of the ID. So the ID we used over here, oh, our HTML file closed. Let's open it again. Want it on this side. All right, so the ID we use over here is main section. Okay, so followed by the name of the ID main section, like that. We can say we want the font size of everything there, everything in that section to be, let's say, 10 pixels, which is very small. Okay, so you can see the click me here, the anchor here, which was the only content of that section, changed to 10 pixels. So this paragraph over here was also in the main section, but the font size didn't change because we had given it a specific font size. That's why I said being specific is very important, because you've already given it, this is more specific than using the main container, which is the main section. It did not affect it. Now, when we remove this paragraph size, you realize that it now affects it as well. So you have to be careful when you are dealing with these, when you give a style somewhere and then you want to give another style affecting the same element at another place. All right, so that is it for using the name, the universal, and the ID as well. The last one I want to mention is using the attributes. Okay, remember what attributes are? These are all attributes, the href attributes, the class attributes. I want to give this anchor a blank target. So let's say we have two anchors on the page. Okay, there's one in this section, and I want to put another one in the footer. So I'll add an anchor. Okay, I'll give it an href, doesn't point anywhere, and then I'll close it, and this one will say link in the footer. Let me put it under the paragraph over here. And if you want to move a line of code, the shortcut to do that, you can cut and paste, which is long. You can just hold down the Alt key and then press down. Okay, and then you have it moving. All right, so it's now here. Okay, and I want to give it a target of blank. All right, so there's an anchor here, there's an anchor here. I want to select this anchor without affecting this anchor. So I can use I want to select the anchor that has a target of blank. I can first select anchor, but then I want a specific one, which is the one with the target of blank. So I use the square brackets. This is what you use for selecting with attributes. And then I'll see targets and equals blank. So if essentially I'm saying that I want the anchor which has the targets as blank. Sorry, it's supposed to be underscore blank. Now I can open my curly braces, and then I can change something. As you can see, our anchors have this underline. In these days, we don't like using this underline. They make the thing look ugly. So you want to get rid of the underline. That's this text decoration, and then you say none. All right, that's how you get rid of the underline. So as you can see, the underline is gone now for this link. All right, so that will be it for the various types of selectors, and I will see you in the next lesson. Let us talk about colors. But before we do that, let me quickly show you the various means of adding CSS. There are three main ways of adding CSS to our page or to our HTML. The main one, or the recommended one, is what we've been doing, which is called the external CSS, okay, where we have the CSS in an external file. The other means are the internal and the inline CSS. Okay, inline CSS we've already come across before, is when you put the CSS right inside the element, when you use the style attribute, and then you say maybe color, then you say green or something. All right, so this inline CSS. So as you can see, it has been affected here, and this is not recommended. Do not do this unless you really have to, or you know what you are doing. The next one is internal CSS. For internal CSS, you use what you call the style tags. Okay, so you have style like this, and then open closing style tag. All right, so inside here you can type CSS code just like we do over here. All right, over here you can select the elements, maybe h1, sorry, yeah, h1, and then you open your curly braces, and then you can change whatever you wish to change. Okay, you can change the font size to say 30 pixels so that it's very obvious and you know you've changed something. Okay, or 50 pixels. All right, so there you go. So that's internal CSS, and this is inline CSS. But as much as possible, you want to keep your HTML file clean. You want to keep it as small as possible. So try and keep all your CSS in an external file. All right, so let's talk about colors. To talk about colors, let me quickly take you to this platform. Okay, HTML color picker. All right, choose the first link on this platform. All right, so there are three major ways of adding color. Okay, the first one is use the color name, which is what we did over here and over here. But mostly you won't actually be doing it this way. You'll be using what we call the hex colors or the hexadecimal system. So this is the using the color name, and this is using the hexadecimal system. It's called hex because you have 6 digits. Okay, and it uses the hexadecimal system. All right, the third one is the RGB system, which stands for red, green, and then blue. So it's just a combination of red, green, and blue. And if you remember, those are the primary colors. Okay, you have the first value representing red, the second value representing green, and then the last value representing blue. The highest value you can get is 255. So if I have 25500, that means I have full red and no green, no blue. So the final thing will become red. And if I have 02550, then the whole thing will become green, right? And then there's this one to HSL system, which is not too common, but you might use it sometimes. I don't think I've ever used it. So it stands for hue, saturation, and then light. Okay, so these are the various colors. With the RGB system, sometimes once you have the color all right, like you have this red, but you want a darker shade or a lighter shade of the color, in that case you use what you call RGBA. Okay, so there's an A here, A representing alpha. A varies from 0.0 to 1.0, and it differs in lightness. So as you can see, this is more like your A values on this side. When you are coding, you write them in not in percentages but in decimals. So this would be 1.0. That means it is absolutely transparent. So this would be 0.95 partially transparent, or 0%. That means it's completely opaque. So those are the main colors that we have, or the ways of adding colors. Let's go back to our project and then try and look at a few colors. We've already seen this way of adding colors. You can use the hex as I mentioned. So you just, let me copy and paste this one. All right, So we can replace this with the hex value. All right, we save it. All right, so this is our color, and then you can use the RGB system as well, and that also works. Okay, so for colors, the main things you'll be changing colors for will be the text. Number one, that's what we've been doing. We've been changing text color, and to change text color, you just use the property color, and then you can also change a background color. Okay, we can select this H1 over here, or the paragraph. All right, so we can select the paragraph and then change the background color of the paragraph. Let's give it, okay, let's give it the blue. There you go, with the background color changing. This looks very ugly and it's hurting my eye, so I'm going to comment out this background color. The next thing you'll probably be changing color for is the border. We can change the border color of this paragraph as well. For now, the border is not visible. Before you even change the color, you have to give a visible border, and you do that this way. All right, we'll do more of that for now. Just look at what I'm doing. In the value for the border property, the first thing you have to identify or give is the width. Okay, so I want a border that is 2 pixels wide or thick, and then I want it to be solid. All right, there are other values like dotted. Okay, so let's try the solid first and see how it looks like, and then finally you add the color. Okay, so you can use, let's pick a color from here. So this is a very useful tool whenever you are working and then you need to find the color. You can just come here and then click around. Let's pick this color. All right, so you can then come and then copy the hex or the RGB, whichever you want, and then you want to add the color here. Let's go back to our project. So we save it. There you have your borders. Okay, so that is changing the border color. Let me give it a different color from the text. All right, let me use the RGB this time so that we see all of them in action. All right, so that's our border color. For changing the text size, there are two main ways of doing it. It's either you are changing the text size directly, like we did here, okay, in the H1, or you are changing it through the parent elements. Okay, parent elements. What do I mean by parent elements? These are some terminologies that we use, especially in HTML. We have parents, we have children, and then we have siblings. Okay, so this header is the parent of this H1 element. The same way this section or the main section is the parent of this paragraph, as well as this anchor tag over here. And this anchor tag and the parent and the paragraph element are the children of this main section. And then finally, this anchor tag is a sibling to this paragraph tag because they are on the same level. Okay, what lies inside an element is its children, and what lies on the same level it is the sibling. I said that you can do it through the parent. For this paragraph over here, where is the parent? This paragraph, the parent is the main section with an ID of main section. So we can select the parent. Okay, we've already selected the parent here with the ID of main section. Remember, you use the hash to select, and then we can change the color from there. So once we change the color over there, it will affect all of its children. Okay, unless the children have already been given a specific color, it will just change the color for all the children. All right, so you can change the color from here. Okay, let's select a different color. Let's take this color now, this one. All right, we can take the hex. I actually prefer using the hex unless I want a lighter or darker shade, then I usually go for the RGB. All right, so let's put the color here. Let's save it. Oh, sorry, we need the hash over there. Okay, so why didn't our color change? Okay, so I think it's because of this. We can comment out, and the shortcut for commenting out, I don't know if I've already mentioned, but it's command and then the // or on Windows, control and then // Alright, so it was actually because of this color that we gave here. So as you can see, we changed the color for the main section, and then it affected this paragraph, which is the child of the main section. Alright, so that will be it for colors, and we will see the use of colors more as we go along. Thank you, and see you in the next lesson. Backgrounds are very important in CSS. But before you go ahead and talk about backgrounds, let me show you something I added to our files. Alright, if you go back into our busy code folder in our intro to CSS, you see this image that I have added. I will provide you with this image, but just to quickly show you where I found this image. Alright, so I found this image, of course, at pexels.com. This is the image right here. So when you go to Pexels, you get to download the image with whatever size you like. So you go here, you click this button over here, or you hover over it, and you get all these sizes that you can choose from. I choose the medium. These ones are too large for our purpose right here. Right, and then you can click the download to download your image. Right. Let's go back into our work. All right. So before we go ahead, I want to add a paragraph to the header over here. So I'll add a paragraph, and I'll add some gibberish, about 30. No, 30 is too much. 20 words. All right, I think that will be fine. Okay, now let's go into our CSS. So we are going to talk about backgrounds. Backgrounds are very important. You can either add just a color or an image to your background. Let's see how you add color to your background. First, we have to select the header. The header includes all the way from here, this each one, and then the paragraph over here. You want to say background image, okay, and then you sorry, we are looking at color first. You want to look at background color, and then let's give it any of these colors here. There you go. Okay, let's increase the height of this header so that we see everything very well. So height, I'll say 50 view height, viewport height. Right, so that's what this VH represents. We'll talk about the units of measurement in CSS very soon. This is one of them, viewport height, which is the height of the vertical height of the screen. Okay, all right. You can see there's some free space around here, which I actually don't like, so I want to get rid of them. I'll use the universal selector. I'll come up here, and then I'll use the universal selector. That free space you see is a margin. All right, so I'll set all margins to 0, and then I'll set all paddings, don't worry about this for now, to 0. All right, so you can see the free space is gone now. Okay, that is how you add a background color to your page. Let's look at how you add image instead of a color. Okay, so see background image. Okay, then use the URL, which is the location of the file, just like we've been doing for the source in the link tag. All right, then you want to open and close your quotations, and then you give the location to the URL. They are on the same level in this case, so I'll just say background. That's the name I give to the file, background.jpg, and then I'll save it. Now there you go. So you have the background of our header here being the image that we used. Okay, so I also want to change the color of the fonts over there so that we can see the text very well. So I want to make it white. White is F 6 times. Oh, sorry, I have to add my semicolon. All right, and I want to make, right, so our texts are much clearer now. Okay, I want to align the content to the center so that they are, so I want to align the text, and I want to put them in the center. Okay, so it's much neater now. I want it to come down a bit, so I'll add a padding top of say 30 pixels. All right, there you go. Okay, how to remove this border? It's annoying. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Okay, so I'll comment out this part. Right, so there you have it. Okay, so that's how you add an image to your background, and there are a few characteristics of the image that you can play around with. You have the image repeat. You can repeat the image horizontally or vertically, but most of the time you just don't repeat the image. So you can have background repeats. Okay, and you can set it to any of these values. You can repeat X, that is repeating it horizontally, repeat Y, repeating it vertically, but usually you set it to no repeat so that you have the image being one. So you can have the background position. Okay, and it can be any of these. It can be at the bottom, it can be any of these, but most of the time you'd set it to center, right? And then you can also have the background size, and you can try out any of these things and look, see how they work, but for now just make it cover. The last one I want to mention is the background attachment. It can be fixed, it can be local scroll. Let's test a few of this. Let's use the scroll. Okay, all right, so for now we don't have enough content such that our page can scroll. So let's go back into our HTML and add some gibberish content here that will go all the way down, and then we can comfortably scroll. So I want to go into the section part and add a paragraph that has about 100 words. Okay, so that's still not enough. So let me make it 1,000. Okay, so our paragraph can scroll now. Okay, so we can see the effect of what I was trying to show us now. So let's go into our style.css. So our background attachment is set to scroll, which means that the background will scroll with our scrolling over here with the content. But if we set this to fixed, okay, look at what happens. Do you see what happens? Content over the background scrolls over the background so that we get to see other parts of the background image. This image looks all the same, so you don't really get the effect. Let me try and get a different image, and then you see the effect of the background attachment. It's actually very beautiful, and it's used in most modern sites. So I'll get another image, and then you look at. Okay, let me take this image on the medium. Yeah. Okay, so let's change the background of our image to background 2, the one I just downloaded. All right, so now when we use the attachments, you can see the effect. Okay, it's much clearer now. That's it for backgrounds. Actually, there's a shorter hand for all these. Instead of typing background image, background repeat, there's a shorter hand. Okay, you just see background. Okay, and then you combine all these in one line. All right, so you start with the color or the image. So in this case you use the URL. All right, and we see background. Let me use the original one, the first one we used, and then the next thing will be the repeat or the non-repeat. So we say no repeats because you don't want it to repeat. The next one would be the position. You want it to be center, and then finally you want it to cover. Okay, let's just leave the size out, right? And then you can also ask the background attachments. All right, so let's comment out this part and then try to use the new one we just created and see whether it works the same. Oh, sorry, we commented out the height as well. Okay, let's comment out here. Yes, so we have our background right here, and that will be it for CSS backgrounds. Okay, so I noticed the fixed wasn't working, so If it's not working, you can just get rid of it from here and then add a background attachment over here and make it fixed from here. All right, so you can separate that one and then it will work. All right, so thank you very much, and that will be it for CSS backgrounds. To demonstrate the box model, let us go back to W3 schools. All right, let's take the first link. W3 Schools is a very useful website for referencing. Okay, so anytime you want to reference something, especially with regards to the web languages, CSS, HTML, JavaScript, and a whole number of other languages, Python and jQuery, a lot of others. Okay, so it's a very good site to go back to for referencing, and you can learn from there as well. Alright, so this is our box model. This is what you call the box model in CSS. It is very useful. You have to understand it. Unless you understand it very well, sometimes adjusting your content on the web page becomes difficult. So you have your content here. So the content could be anything, an image, text, whatever. And then there's a border. Usually the borders are not visible, but you can make it visible by giving it the border property. And then the space between the content and the border is what you call the padding, okay, over here. And then the space outside the border, from the border to the next or the previous elements or to the neighboring elements, is what we call margin. This is all that we mean by the box model. Let us see it in action. First, I want to give this paragraph a class so that we use it for demonstrating our box model, talking about borders, margin, and then padding as well. Alright, so I want to give it as class, let's say special. You can name it anything at all. Okay, let's save it, go to our CSS, and then let's select the special and then format it over here. Alright, so it's in the footer and then it has the class name special. Okay, so what I just did was that first I targeted the footer and then the dot special inside the footer. Alright, I want to first give it a background color so that we really see what is going on over here. Okay, so I want to give it a background color of this one might do. All right, so as you can see, the content over here is too close to this anchor or this link and then this one over here. So we want to separate it. We want to organize it better. First, let me show you the border because we reference everything to the border. So it's from the content to the border and outside the border. So first, let's talk about the border. There are a few properties when it comes to border. You can talk about the border style. You can talk about the border style, and there are a number of styles. Okay, so you can have the dotted, you can have the dashed, or the solid, which is what you'd normally use. So let's try the dashed for now. Okay, all right. So if you save it, you see your dashed borders. Okay, so that's your borders, your border. Let's try the solid. Okay, and then you also have dotted. All right, as you can see. All right, for now I'll keep it at the solid. You can also have the border width. You can make it any value at all, but I'll make it 5 pixels just for you to see it in action, so you see it's increased in width. Right, you can also have the border color. All right, so the border color, you can give it any color at all. Let me give it this orange. There you go. You can do all these things. You can actually change the borders differently. You can change the top border, the right border, the left border. You can format them differently. So you can have border top, then you can make the border top in this color, so you see it change, and then you can mess around. You can go with border bottom, border right, and border left as well. These 3 lines, there's actually a shorthand for these 3 lines. You don't have to type them one after the other. The shorthand is first you declare border, and then you put all these border, the width, and then the style, the width, and then the color all in one line. So usually I start with the width, which we give 5 pixels, and then the style solid, and then the color. Okay, all right, let's comment out this one and see if what we just did. Sorry, let's save it. Alright, so as you can see, this is actually working. It's 5 pixels, it's solid, and it has the color that we gave it over here. So that is it for our border. There's one more thing. You can talk about the border radius. Okay, you can talk about the border radius, and you can give it any value at all, but it's in percentage. Okay, so you can have 10%. All right, so you can see the border is now looking a little curved. Let me reduce the, let me make it 2 pixels so that it's more obvious. Okay, and because the content are too close to the border, it is difficult to see now. So let's talk about the margin. All right, so as I said, margin is from the border to the nearest content or the nearest elements. Okay, so you can have, just like we did for the border, you can have margin top, margin bottom, margin right, margin left, and all that. So you can have margin top to be 20 pixels, and you can have margin bottom, and let's give that 10 pixels, and you can have margin right, let's give that 10 pixels as well. Actually, let's make the margin bottom 20 pixels. Okay, then finally we have margin right, margin left, sorry, and let's make that 10 pixels. Let's see how it looks. All right, so as you can see, our content is well separated from the nearest content, that's the margin. All right, so we've given it margin, and there's a shorthand for this one too, of course. So you just declare the margin. It's just like we did for the border. We declare the margin, and then this is the order. First is the top, 20 pixels. Next is the right, so you go in that order, so 10 pixels. Next is bottom, so you can go 20 pixels. Okay, and then finally on the left, 10 pixels. So this is a replacement for all that. So you can comment out this and it should still be the same. Okay, so as you can see, nothing has changed. There's actually an even better shorter hand. So when the top and bottom are the same, and then the right and the left are also the same, there's a much shorter hand. Okay, you declare margin, then you go like 20 pixels, and then 10 pixels. So the first value, when there are only two values like this, the first value represents top and bottom, and then the second value represents right and left. And of course, that only works when top and bottom are the same, and then right and left are also the same. Right. One last very common one is to use margin auto to set the margin to auto. This horizontally centers the element so that you have equal margin on the right and on the left, and it usually comes with by giving the content some width. Okay, so let's say we give it a width of 60%. Okay, all right, so as you can see, oh sorry, okay, so as you can see, our width is 60% and our margin is auto. Let me comment out these ones. Our margin is auto, so we didn't specify any margins on the right or on the left, but because we said auto, it horizontally centers the element and gives equal margins on the left and on the right as well. All right, let us now look at, let's change the width back to something like 80. 60 is too small. All right, now let's look at, okay, so I said auto only focuses on the horizontal, that is left and right. If you want margin on top and down too, you can bring the first value here, 20 pixels, then auto. All right, let us now talk about padding. Padding is the space between the content, so in this case the text, and then the border. Just as we have for these ones, you can have padding top, padding bottom, padding right, and you can have these same shorthands for padding, these same shorthands, and all that applies for margin applies for padding. Of course, I'm not going to go through these repetitions again. I'm going to use the shorthand and then we'll give it a neat padding. Okay, so let's give it a padding. Okay, sorry, let's give a padding of top and bottom 20 pixels, 20 pixels, right and left 10 pixels. All right, I think that will work. Beautiful. So you can see our content is well separated from the border. Okay, so I want to increase the border radius so that you see how this thing, the radius, the edges gets curved. So we can go like 30%. Alright, so you see it getting more curvy as we increase the border radius. If you want it to be completely round, then your container over here has to be a square. Okay, the first thing to do is to make your container a square. So you can, and to do that, you give it equal height and width. So you can give it say 200, 300 pixels width, and then you can give it a height of 300 pixels as well. Okay, let's save it, and then we can now give it a border radius of 50%, and there you go, you have a completely round border. But of course it doesn't match, the content is overgrowing the borders. That will be it for the box model. Hopefully when we do our project we will apply some of these. Units of measurement and dimensions can be very confusing in CSS and involves a lot of experimentation. Okay, so let's look at this paragraph over here. Let's mess around with it a little. In the units of measurement, you have two main forms. Okay, you have the absolute forms of measurement or units of measurement, and then you have the relative units of measurement. Absolute units of measurement means they are fixed, so no matter how the device screen changes, it remains the same. So whether it's on mobile or a tablet or PC, it's still the same size. And these include millimeters, centimeters, and pixels, which we've already looked at. Millimeters and centimeters, I don't think you would ever use them. Don't use them, it's not advisable. You can use pixels because pixels kind of vary with the DPI of the screen size. So as the pixel quality of the screen size changes, pixels also changes. So pixels is a bit safe. The second type we have is the relative units. Okay, so this include EM, REM, and VH and VW. Let us look at how these work. The first one we will look at is the EM. EM, it's a unit that is in reference to the parent of an element. Okay, so I said we should look at this paragraph. I want to target this paragraph. Okay, first I want to target the header, which is the parent of this element, this whole part. That's the header. All right, and I want to give it a font size of 30 pixels. Okay, so it's quite big now. Now I want to go into I want to target the header, sorry, the paragraph in the header. I told you that EM is with reference to the parent elements. So if I say font size over here and I say 1 EM, it means 1 times the font size of the parent element, which is 30 pixels, and so this one will remain 30 pixels. Okay, but if I say 2 EM, it means 2 times the parent element, and which would therefore be 60 EM. See how big that is. Okay, so I can say 0.5 EM, which is half of the parent element, which is 15 pixels. All right, so that's EM. The next one is REM, like this. REM is relative to the root element. Okay, when you talk about the root element, we are talking about the HTML element, this HTML element. All right, and the default is 16 pixels. So if I say 1 rem or rem, then the font size should be 16 pixels. If I say 2, it should therefore be 32 pixels. I can change the roots, the size of the root element to say 20 pixels. Okay, I can go up here. Usually you want to do it at the topmost level when you want to change the rooted element. I can change the HTML. I can give it a font size of 20 pixels. Now, when I say 1 EM, you see it's a little bigger than the first one, which was 16 pixels. When I see 2 REM, it's with reference to the 20 pixels over here, which is the root element, and will give me something much bigger. All right, the next one will be VW, which stands for viewport width. This header, for example, or this same paragraph, you want to compare it to the width of the viewport, okay, of the screen, right? This VW is in reference to the width of the screen over here, right? So when I say font size and I make it, and this is more like percentage, okay? So it can be 100 VW like this. Okay, so instead of font size, let's make this the width of the paragraph and not the font size. Comparing the font size to the viewport width will make the font size too big. All right. So if I say the width of the paragraph should be 100 viewport width, that means I want the paragraph to cover 100% of the width of the screen. Okay. If I say 60 view width, means it should cover 60% of the screen. All right. You can go 40. Okay, this in reference to the entire screen. Okay, and that is for the viewport width. You can also compare uh, stuff using the viewport height, which is from this end all the way to that end. Okay, a very good example would be, let me change this back to 100. A very good example would be the background image. If I want this background image to cover the whole height of the screen, I'll use the viewport height, and I think we've used it already actually over here. Okay, so we set it to 50 view height. We can actually change it to 100. There you go. Okay, so until you scroll, it covers everything, and then when you scroll, um, so that's viewport height. Okay, you see this in a lot of landing pages for some products where the background image covers the entire um, height of the viewport or the screen. The last one I'll talk about with regards to the units of measurement would be the percentage. Over here, let's take the width of the paragraph, for example. Instead of 100 using the view width, we can use percentage. And when you use percentage, it is in reference to the parent element, which is in this case the header. You can see 50%. Did you see that? So it's now occupying 50% of the width of the its parent container. Okay, if you want to center it, you can just do text align, and then you say center. Sorry, and then you have to give it a margin of 02. All right, and then it's now in the center. You can actually get rid of this text align. You give it a margin of 02, and then it will center it for you. That was just by the way. All right, let me change back my heights to 50. All right, so that is it for the units of measurements. Let's look at height and then width. We've already been looking at height and width a bit. We can let's do a little more on the height and the width. So you've seen height and you've seen width. What we are yet to see is maximum height and maximum width. Okay, so over here we said the width should be, let me use, all right, let me say the width should be 100% and remove this margin 02. All right, so the width is now 100%. What we haven't seen is the minimum and maximum width. If you can set a minimum width or a maximum width for it. So if I set a max width for this paragraph element over here, it means that however the paragraph goes, it shouldn't go beyond that width. So it will override this width that we've set here. If we set it to say 50%, you see that? So it overrides this width that we set here. All right, even if it's on top like that, it still overrides the width that we set here. That is max width. Okay, you can do the same thing for minimum width, and then you can do the same for height as well. So you can set a max height and then a minimum height. Okay, so we set a max width here. Let us try minimum height. Okay, so we can do minimum height, let's say 60 or 80 VH. 80 viewport height. All right, originally we set the height to 50 viewport height, Now we want to set the minimum to 80 viewport height. You see that the height will come down a little bit because that is the minimum. Even though we say it's 50, the minimum says it should be 80. So all right, there you go. So that is it for the units of measurement and the dimensions. As I said, these can be very tricky, so you have to be alert, you have to play around with it. It involves a lot of experimentation. You put in the value, you go and check if what you have there is what you're expecting. If not, you change a few things around, and then you hope things get better. All right, thank you for following along with me, and I will see you in the next lesson. Let us now look at text formatting and fonts. Okay, before we start, I want to remove this paragraph from the footer. Footers normally don't have paragraphs. All right, and then I want to add another section. So section, I want to give it an ID of formatting because we are going to use it to learn formatting. All right, inside it, I want to create a div, and if I haven't mentioned div already, div is a very important tag. You'll be using it a lot. It's simple for division, so use it to create small divisions of your content. As you go along, we use it more, and especially when we get to the project, we use it more, and then you get to know how it is used. For now, we don't have a very good structure here because we are just trying to learn the bits and pieces of HTML and CSS. When we apply it in a project, it will look much better, and then you learn better. All right, so a div, and I want to give it a class of say format. All right, inside the div, I want an h3. That is, let's learn how to format text. All right, and then I want a paragraph with about 25 words. All right. Okay, there we have our paragraph, but it's a bit too close to the edges, so let's give it some margin. Let's select our section first. We call it formatting, and inside it, oh sorry, that was an ID, so we should select it with the hash. And inside it we have a container or a div that has the class of formats like this, and we want to give it margin. We want say 30 pixels top and down, and sorry, 30 pixels top and down, and you want 10 pixels left and right. There you go. All right, so it's looking a bit cool now. I want to give some margin down here so that you don't have to keep looking down. Okay, let me just put it somewhere. I'll give the footer, and I'll give a margin bottom. Okay, I'll see 150 pixels. Okay, so it's okay now. All right, now let's look at the various formatting styles that we have. The first one we look at is text alignment. There are three major alignments. You have the right alignment, the left alignment, and then the center, four actually, center alignment, and then the justify. Okay, so let's try out some of these. So you just see text align, that's the property. As you can see, we have center. So if I choose center, so you can see everything is centered now. I can say to the right. Okay, and it's all over to the right. Let me reduce the height of this header. Okay, so I want to show you, before we continue, I want to show you a quick trick to search something in the VS Code. Okay, for example, if I'm searching for header, I can press Command F on Mac or Control F on Windows. Okay, so Command F, and then I type whatever I'm searching for. So if I'm searching for footer, I type footer, and once I found footer, it will find all the footers, and I can press the up and down to go from one footer to the other. And if I want to replace the text footer with something, I just press here, and then I can see replace it with say header. Okay, and then it will replace, if I press here, it will replace only the one that is selected currently. but if I press on this button right here, it will replace all the footers to headers. All right, that was just by the way. Okay, so let's go back to our aligning, and you can also see justify, and it occupies the whole length. For now, we keep it at center. Right, the next thing will be the text decoration. We usually use this with anchors or links. So text decoration, and you have underline. Okay, as you can see, you have overline, you have strike through, line through, not strike through, like that. So let's keep it at underline. And you also have none. Okay, if you set it to none, usually you want to set it to none. Okay, for paragraph you don't even need decoration, and even in footers we usually set the decoration to none so that we don't have them underlined as in this one. So over here we removed the underline even though it's a footer. All right, so the next one would be the text transform property. So we have text transform, and you can transform your text to lowercase or uppercase. So if you try uppercase, you see to transform everything to uppercase, and you can do that for lowercase, or you can go to capitalize, and this will make the first letter of every word capital. The next one will be text indentation. The next one will be the text indent, and you can give it say 50 pixels. All right, because it is center aligned, the indentation is not really obvious. Let me make it left aligned. Now the indentation is much more obvious. All right, so the next one will be the line heights, which you also use every now and then. It's very important. So it increases the height between the lines of the sentences. So you can say 1.2, which will make it, if 1.0 is the normal, okay, but if you go to 1.5 to be very wide apart, and you can go below 1 to say 0.6, and it will be much smaller, which will look very weird. So let's keep it at 1.3. Now let's look at fonts. We have various types of fonts. You declare your fonts with the fonts family. All right, and as you can see here, all these are types of fonts. There are three main categories of fonts. We have the serif, we have the sans serif, and then we have monospace. As you can see, yes, sans serif, then there's monospace over here, and then there's serif somewhere in these ones. So serif is the ones with dashes at their end. Okay, so these extensions. Okay, so if I say fonts family and I choose a sans serif font family like Arial. Okay, Arial is a sans serif, so you see there are no dashes. That's the most popular sans serif font. And if I say Times New Roman, Times New Roman is one of the popular serif fonts. Right, there you go. Okay, so as you can see, there's Times New Roman. You can actually put only Times New Roman and it should work. Right, it's working. But you do this so that if for some reason Times New Roman is not available, then they'll give you Times. If Times is not available, then give me any serif at all. The same thing when I do for say Arial. It means that I want Arial, but if Arial is not available for some reason, give me Helvetica. If Helvetica is not available, give me any sans serif at all. The final thing we mention here will be the font weight, and you can make this bolder. See, it gets bolder, or any of the other values, lighter, normal, 700, 800, and all that. All right, that will be it for text formatting and also for fonts. You see more as we go along. Thank you for coming along with me, and I will see you in the next lesson. Let us look at some of the techniques in styling links or buttons. Okay, so to do that, first I want to create a new section here, a section, and I want to give it an ID of link. All right, and inside it I want a div with the class of container. Right. And I want an anchor tag with an href that doesn't point anywhere, and I want the tag to say register. All right. I just want to also add a button here so that we can actually use a button instead of an anchor tag. All right. So the button will say maybe submit, so that we see how they both look like. Okay, so that's our register anchor, and then that's our button. As you can see, they both look very ugly, so you'd have to use CSS to style them. So first, let's select the container and then give it some margin. It's too close to this one over here. We will go through the section. The ID is called, we give it an ID of link, and you want to select the anchor inside the link. Oh, sorry, we first want to select the container. Okay, that's like that, and we want to give it margin. Okay, let's give it a margin of say 20 or 30 pixels so that we have more space around it. All right, there you go. Okay, now we can select our anchor. Go to link anchor. Right, I want to give the anchor some margin around the anchor as well. So let's see, 20 pixels. Right, nice. Let me make it about 40. Now, the first thing you probably have to do for an anchor is to remove this ugly underlining. We would like to have the underlining if it was maybe a passage and then there's a link inside, so the underlining will point a user to the fact that that is a link. But if you want to turn this into a button, which is what you are going to do now, then you don't need the underline. To remove the underline, you just do text decoration and then we set it to none. Now the underlining is gone, and the next thing to do will be to change the color to whatever color we would like. For now, I just give it say green. All right, so there you go. And then you want to give it a border. We want a nice button, so we want to give it some border, and you want to say we want 2 pixels, want it to be solid, and then you want it to be green as well. This is something you see on most websites. You can see the content is too close to the border, and if you remember, the space between the content and the border is the padding. So let's give it some padding. Let's say 20 pixels. All right, it's a bit too ugly. The top padding is too much, so let's make it 10 pixels top and down, and then 20 pixels left and right. All right, so it looks much better now. But the borders are too square, like let's make it a bit rounded by giving it a border radius of about 10 pixels. Our button is looking nice now, our link. All right, so I just want to add that you can give these same stylings to the button over here. Okay, so we just do it for the link. When you are done, we just copy and paste it for the button, and you realize we have virtually the same thing. That's it for our button, the normal state of our button. To style a button, an anchor or a link, there are some special selectors that we use. They are called pseudo class selectors. We've seen other selectors such as the ID and then the class and the name or the tag name. All right, so pseudo class selectors are declared like this. You have the elements that you want to add the pseudo class selector to. So you have the elements such as an anchor, then you bring a colon, then you add the pseudo class, for example, hover. Okay, let's do that for our anchor here. And we want to select the anchor. We want to give it a pseudo class. So anchor has a number of pseudo classes. You have the hover stage, you have the link stage, you have the visited stage, and then you have the active stage. Okay, the most popular ones would probably be the visited and the hover. We don't actually use the visited that much. The visited is what it does is that you want to style the link when it has been visited, a link that has been visited. So when you go to a website, you realize that the links that you visited before, when you open Google, have a different color. Okay, that is what this visited does. And hover changes the CSS when I hover over or when I mouse over that particular element. Okay, so let's add the hover, which is what you'd mostly do. The others are not too common. And once we hover over it, we want to change the background color to green. All right, let's save it and see it in action. Do you see that? But once we do that, the text is also disappearing because the text is also green. So we want to change the text to white. We want to change the color of the text to white, or which is FFFFF. Right, now let's look at it. This is our button now. It looks quite nice. You can apply this same CSS to the button and you realize that the button actually also looks the same. Let's quickly do that and see. So we want to select, then we want to select the button there. And then let's copy and paste this. All right, so there you have your button. The button doesn't need this one. Okay, and you can also copy the, you can also do the hover for the button. Here instead of anchor, you see, you see that. But we usually prefer using the link and then editing it to look like a button instead of using a button directly, because the link gives you the href attributes, which is the location of the file you want to move to. And when you use the submit to add the location, you would have to use JavaScript. CSS display property and element positioning can be very confusing, so pay attention. To demonstrate this, I've added this section over here, okay, and that's it over here. Okay, so you can also go ahead and add that. All right, let's go into our CSS now. So as you can see from here, from the HTML, inside the section, we have 3 individual divs. Each div has a heading, so like this one, and then a paragraph, like this paragraph over here. And there are 3 of them. And the divs all have the class container. First, I want to select the section, which I named display, and I want to give it a bit of margin. 10 pixels should be fine. And then I want to select the containers or the divs and then give them a bit of margin at the bottom so that they look a bit neat. I give them, yes, the dot container. All right, I want to give them margin bottom of say 20 pixels to make them a bit neat. I think that's fine now. All right, now we can go ahead and work on the paragraph. I want to demonstrate to you the display types. There are 3 types of display. We have inline display, inline block display, and then block display. So what I'm talking about is this. Okay, and then I want to select the paragraph inside this display property. Okay, sorry. So this display property is what we are going to be working on. Actually, it's not a paragraph that I want to select. I want to select, I wrapped some of the text in the paragraph in a span element. If you remember span element, I said it is, you use it to wrap an element if you want to give it a special styling. So you can see, let's take the first div. So this is the first div. So you can see the paragraph over here, and I've wrapped this word, the concept style, whatever. I've wrapped it in a span element, and I've given it the ID of inline. The same thing for the next element to it, which is, so this word and this word are both wrapped in an element, in a span element, and have the class of inline. So I'll use that one to demonstrate how inline display works, and I'll use this one, which is the same word, the same 2 words, and I'll use them to demonstrate how inline block works, and then finally block. All right, so I want to select, first I want to select the inline, the element that we gave the class inline. All right, and I want to set their display element. So I said there are 3 types. The first one is inline, and that's what we are going to look at first. Okay, so I've set the display of these 2 words, this one and that one, to inline. And if you remember, we said inline elements can exist next to each other on the same line, but block elements cannot do that. And then finally we have inline block. Inline block is an intermediate between block elements and inline elements. The key thing about inline elements is that they can exist next to each other, but you cannot change their height or their width. And for block elements, they cannot exist next to each other. They take their own lines, but you can change their height and their width. Inline block is a compromise between inline and then block. In inline block, you have the elements being able to exist next to each other, and at the same time you are able to manipulate their height and width. Let's look at inline in action. In order to make it more obvious, I'll give this element a border. Okay, say 2 pixels solid, and let's make it green, and let me give it a bit of padding. 5 pixels should be fine. All right, now we've set them to inline. Okay, so as you can see, they are still next to each other. If we had set them block, they wouldn't be able to exist next to each other. Let me give it a bit of background color, so let's say green. All right, so I think it's more obvious this way. So let's see how inline block looks like. Dot inline, that was inline block. Okay, so first we want to set the display to block. We want to set the display to, sorry, inline block. And then actually let me just copy everything we have here. We only change the display to inline block. Okay, and then we change the display to inline block. There you go. When I try to change this height or width for the inline one, you see that it will not have any effect. Okay, watch this. Let me give it a height of 100 pixels and save. Nothing happens. I can also give it a width of 100 pixels, save. Nothing happens. But look, when we do that for the inline block elements, did you see that? You can manipulate the height and width for the inline block, but you can't do that for the inline. Finally, let's look at block display. Okay, let's change this to block, and then change this to block as well. Where is that one? Oh, sorry, there should be the dots here. All right, so can you see here? You can see that they exist on different lines altogether now. That is for block elements, and you can manipulate their heights and their width. Very quick correction. Okay, so the heading, it seems the heading here and this one and that one are the same. Actually, the heading over here should say inline. This is inline block display, and this should say this is block display. Okay, so you can quickly make that correction. I have added this simple section here to demonstrate CSS element positioning. So it's just a section with a div with a class of container, and inside that div I have 5 other divs. Okay, as you can see over here, each of the divs have the classes border and then a special class. Okay, so these classes over here are the values of the CSS position property. So we look at how they each apply. If I haven't mentioned before, an element can actually have a number of classes, okay, like we have here. So you can have as many classes as you want, and you can see that they all have the class border because I want to apply the same styling to all of them, and they all have these special classes because if I want to target these classes and apply a special styling to them. Now let's go to our CSS. The section has the ID of position. Alright, the first thing I want to do is to give it a little bit of margin. Let's give it 20 pixels. That should be fine. This is our section over here. The next thing I want to do is to target the border class, okay, because I want to give all of them that this style that I'm about to add. I want to give them a border. That's why I actually named the class border. I want a 2 pixels border. I want it to be solid, and I want it to be red, just to distinguish them very well, and then we don't have to suffer to find them. I also want to give them a padding, a margin. I want to give them a margin of about 30 pixels. Now they are very wide apart. Okay, so let's look at the first one, which is static over here, this static position. Let's select that element. First, we go through the position, and then the element has a class of static. Yes, I think, yes, like this. All right, so we want to give it a position of static. Static is the default position, so it doesn't actually give any special effect, so we don't expect to see anything. In describing positions, there are some keywords that we use. The top keyword, okay, the top property, so you can set it to maybe say 30 pixels, 100 pixels, whatever. You can also use percentages, so you can say 30%. When you use these percentages, it is with reference to something, and we'll be looking at that. So the static, using the static positioning, it is not affected by any of these top or bottom, right? And then we have right, and then left too. So use these to describe the position, and it is all with reference to something. So we'll look at all those very soon. All right, so the static is not affected by the top, bottom, right or left or whatever, because it is the default and it doesn't really change position. Okay, the next one would be, actually let me copy and paste this one, and then we modify it a bit. Oops. The next one would be the relative position. Now, relative position is with reference to its original position. This is the original position, right? So if I say top, say 30 pixels, now you can see it has shifted 30 pixels from the top, relative to its original position. So 30 pixels down from its original position. And I can see something like left. Okay, then I see 20 pixels. So it shifts 30 pixels away from the left. Sorry, 20 pixels. That is it for relative. The next one would be the absolute. And let me show you a shortcut for highlighting multiple words when they are the same. Okay, so you have relative here and you have relative here. If you want to highlight both of these relatives, you can highlight the first one, then you hold down Command or Control key, then you press D, and it will highlight it for you. All right, so if there are multiple, okay, the same word is repeating, then you can highlight all those ones. Right, so if I want to highlight the top word here, so I highlight top, Command D, and it will highlight every top for me. All right, so I'll change it to absolute. All right, so absolute is first, it has two references. The first one is with reference to the viewport. So over here, it is being referenced to the viewport. So it is 30 pixels away from the top of the viewport and 20 pixels away from the left part of the viewport. All right, that is the first way. The second way is that if its parent element has a position, usually use the position of relative. So its parent element in this case is the container element. So if you give the container a position of relative, so let's quickly do that. Okay, let's give, if we give it a position of relative, now this absolute will be with reference to its parent element. So as you can see, so the parent element is this whole div, and it's now 30 pixels away from the top of its parent element and 20 pixels away from the left of its parent element. But if its parent element doesn't have this relative positioning, then it will be with reference to the viewport. That is what absolute does. All right, so let me change this value to say 40 pixels so that it doesn't match with this one too much. The next one would be the fixed positioning. Okay, so let's change this to fixed. Save it. Okay, so as you can see, this is where we have it. So fixed positioning is such that, as the name suggests, it is fixed to one particular position and it does not change, it does not move, no matter how you scroll. So you can see it remains there even as we scroll. That is fixed position. And it is with reference to the viewport, 30 pixels as we said from here from the top, and 20 pixels from the left, and it will remain there without changing position. All right, the last one will be the sticky. Let's change this to sticky. Sticky actually has issues. It doesn't work on every browser. It changes from, it has different effects from one browser to the other browser. So it might not work for some of you. I don't think it's even working for me. How it works is that, let me change this to 0. Okay, so how it works is that when you scroll, first it moves, and when it gets to a particular position which you specify here, so when I specified 0, it should have worked such that when I scroll and that element, which is this sticky element here, when it gets to the top, that is 0 from the top, when it gets there, it should stick and stop moving. So first it behaves like relatively positioned element and moves with scrolling, but when we get to the top where you specified, it stops moving and it sticks there and it becomes fixed there. All right, so that is it for CSS positioning. Let me mention this one last thing before you go, is the Z index. Okay, so once I make this fixed, you realize that it comes on top of all the elements here. But if I want this paragraph to come on top of this fixed element, I use what you call the Z index. Okay, so I increase the Z index of this paragraph and it will come on top of this element here, or I decrease the Z index of this element here and then it will go below. So I can decrease the Z index of this element. Normally the Z index is 0 for all of them. So if I increase this one to 1 or 2 or 3, some people even make 1,000, it will come beyond this one, over this one. If I decrease this one to a negative value, it will go below that one. So I can see maybe negative 2. So you can see it is now hiding behind the paragraph and the header over here. It comes and then it goes behind everything in the header. Because its Z index is slower than everything on the page now, it goes behind everything. Thank you. This is it for CSS positioning.